Welcome back to Harbour Unboxed. Today I'm announcing the final winners of Upgrade My PC Please Season 1. Over the past 3 months, we've looked at 50 computers and upgraded 10 of them based on guidance from you, the viewers. The final winner of Season 1 is JC from the US with his smart-looking mini ITX rig. By winning, he'll now be able to upgrade from that AMD APU and Radeon HD 6870 graphics card that he currently has to a Ryzen 5 processor with a GeForce GTX 1050 Ti. So congratulations to JC on winning the final episode. The $500 US upgrade package includes not just the Ryzen 5 1400 processor and GeForce GTX 1050 Ti graphics card, but also a shiny new X370 motherboard with 8GB of DDR4 memory. Also taking home a cool prize is SVD Killswitch for voting and commenting on last week's episode, and they're taking home a Ryzen 5 1500X, and this is now the 10th viewer to walk away with a prize. In total this season, TechSpot in collaboration with Harbour Unboxed has given away $5,000 US worth of PC upgrades, and with the help of our partners, well over $2,000 US worth of prizes for the viewers. It's been a fun season and we're keen to do it all over again. Right now we're targeting February next year to start Season 2, and we will be kicking that off with a look back at all the winners from this season and see how they got on with all their upgrades. For those of you who've already submitted your PC, well, you don't have to do that all over again for Season 2. That said though, I strongly recommend you go back and update your photos and provide the best photos you can. It really is all about the photos. You can reply to the existing post that you've already made in your private thread there and just update photos there, or you can even edit the original submission, however you want to do it, but you can go back to that original thread. Please update the photos. We have had over 1,400 submissions so far, and next season we'll be picking just 50 of the best. Again, photos really are everything. Without good quality photos, you simply won't be picked. Unfortunately, that is the situation. Looking at what we have to work with now, I can almost guarantee that if you do provide high quality photos, that will ensure that your PC makes it onto Season 2. Anyway, as we get closer to starting Season 2, I will release another video containing all the important information, any changes or tweaks that we may have made for Season 2. Well, that's going to wrap up Season 1. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Taking out this video, I'll show all 10 submissions that won this season. I'm your host, Steve. See you again next time. Crikey, we're back in Australia, this time with Hayden and his CAD Box. I promise I'll never do that again for the remainder of this video. Right, okay, down to business. So Hayden built this rig with his stepfather almost 4 years ago now, with the intention of using it for CAD assignments as he is a student. Of course, like most of us, he does enjoy the odd gaming session from time to time, and he mostly plays Europa 4, Factorio, and Civilization 6. The problem is the Core i5-4670 is getting hammered with the CAD work. It takes hours to complete short 3-minute renders, so we definitely need some more CPU firepower. Ideally, I'd love to suggest something like the Ryzen 7 1700, but that's just not going to fit within our budget, unfortunately. And the idea of something like a Threadripper build would no doubt have Hayden frothing at the mouth, but again, not realistic for our budget. Anyway, getting back to reality, once again I'm going to recommend the Ryzen 5 1600 with its 6 cores and 12 threads. It will be ideal for the CAD work. Strap that on the B350 motherboard with 8GB of DDR4 memory and we're set. Once memory prices do settle down, Hayden might want to add another 8GB, and then the system would be unstoppable for his CAD work. Hayden says he's also keen to give overclocking a shot, so I suggest throwing in the CryoRig M9A. Fellow Aussie Brayden is rocking along with Oldy McOld, a hand-me-down PC from his sister many years ago. The only upgrade made since receiving the PC includes a GTX 660 and a larger 500GB hard drive. Short of that though, Brayden hasn't had the funds for any big upgrades. It sounds like Brayden does a little bit of work in Lightworks, but mostly likes to play games such as Rocket League, Overwatch and CSGO. And while very fun, popular games, I assume they're mostly played out of necessity, as they aren't the most demanding titles. Right, so for our younger viewers out there, the Core 2 Duo E8600 was a high-end flagship dual-core processor released way back in 2008 by Intel, and at the time it was a bit special. Today though, it runs Rocket League like Bicycle League, and no matter how hard it pedals with just 2GB of RAM, it's going to be a jerky ride. Because we're coming from so far back, I'm going to recommend the Pentium G4560 for this one, opposed to Ryzen 3. In terms of pricing, it's much the same, but we're going about things a little differently for this one. Now, you might be confused by the relatively high-end Z270 board from ASRock, but the idea here is to provide Brayden with a set of components that will allow him to make further upgrades in the future. Dropping in a Core i5 or a Core i7 perhaps down the track will give this system a new lease on life. Meanwhile, the GTX 1050 is a massive upgrade from the GTX 660, and that pretty much goes without saying. And finally, the thought of Brayden running this newly refurbished system on an old 500GB hard drive was just too much for me. So we're putting down the angle grinder and getting out Kingston's A400, which will make for a super snappy boot drive. With this upgrade, Brayden can certainly enjoy some new games. First up, we have an old Sandy Bridge Core i5 PC from Akki, which has been named Akatsuki. I hope I said that right. Anyway, it was built back in 2011 with just 4GB of RAM and the pokey little GeForce GT430. Since then, a few difficult upgrades have been made. Akki received the GeForce GTX 480 as a hand-me-down from a relative, so that was a decent step up from the GT430. However, the Fermi-based graphics card is physically quite long. As a result, the hacksaw came out and the 3.5-inch drive bay got the chop. So with a bit of violence, that problem was solved quite quickly. The next problem, as many of you know, Fermi is a hot item, and with limited case cooling, Akki had to whack in a 120mm fan on the side of the case to feed in some fresh air. The GTX 480 also slayed the old power supply, so to solve that issue, the EVGA Supernova 750 G2 was dropped in. I'd normally say that's extreme overkill, but then we are talking about a GTX 480 after all. Upgrading the memory was no easy task either, as it was discovered that the second DIMM slot on the H61 motherboard ended up being dead, so Akki had to sell the 4GB sticks and buy a single 8GB module for single channel operation. As a student, Akki uses the PC for projects, but like most of us, also enjoys the odd game. Apparently, stuttering is a serious problem for titles such as Just Cause 3 and Resident Evil 7 using low to medium quality settings. So let's see what we can do about that. Since we are dealing with a locked Core i5 CPU here, a platform upgrade really is in order. Therefore, I'm going to propose the Ryzen 5 1400 on a Gigabyte B350 motherboard with 8GB of memory. This leaves us with enough cash to buy either a new SSD or a case. Sadly though, there isn't enough money left over to get something like a GTX 1050, so we'll have to stick with that GTX 480 for now. Akki can tackle that at a later date. For me, the case really is a sad affair, and I can't imagine putting any new hardware into that thing, so I've picked out the Fractal Design Focus Mini G. This is a smart combo that will not just look great, but it'll also work very well. Last but not least, we have the Deathstar, and if we're lucky with the help of the Force, we can fire 2 proton torpedoes into the AM3 Plus socket and end it. Gabriel built the system about a year ago, he says, and I've really got no idea what his excuse is. If he'd been following the channel or reading the content over on TechSpot, we could have saved him a lot of heartache. Anyway, Gabriel says it was meant to be more of a workstation / mid-range gaming PC, but today it's really just no longer cutting it. Games such as Battlefront, Skyrim, and Battlefield 4, they play okay, he says, but more modern titles are really becoming an issue. The FX 6300 and GTX 1050 Ti combo is really going to struggle at 1080p with modern games, so we really do have to focus the budget on getting a new CPU as well as a GPU. Ideally, I would have liked to upgrade the RAID max power supply, but that'll just have to do for now. Thankfully, the upgraded PC probably will draw less power than what the FX system's using currently. Gabriel already has an SSD, so we can leave the storage alone. So I propose we opt for the Ryzen 5 1400 on the ASRock AB350 Pro 4 with 8GB of DDR4 memory. Then, to really improve the gaming experience, we'll ditch the GTX 750 Ti in favour of the GTX 1050 Ti, and that right there is a big step up indeed. The 1050 Ti is capable of tackling all the latest titles at 1080p using reasonably good quality settings, so Gabriel won't know himself. Next up, we have a rather bland looking system from Vince. This looks very much like something you would find in an office type setting, and frankly that's probably where it belongs. Sadly, Vince is trying a game on this thing and he says he's having very little fun doing so. Right now he's playing CSGO using low quality settings at low frame rates, and it's much the same with other games he likes to play such as Rust and Far Cry 3. Like the A1050-800K that we looked at previously, the A1070-700K only has a 384 stream processor enabled Radeon GPU, so it's extremely weak by today's standards. As usual, we do only have a $500 US budget, so we're going to have to stretch it pretty big for this one. When on a budget, go Ryzen 3, I always say, and that's been a saying for like 2 months now. Anyway, the R3 1200 on the ASRock AB350M with 8GB of DDR4 will work a treat. Then upping Vince's game will be the GeForce GTX 1060 3GB, and that will be perfect for his low-res monitor. Then making sure the upgrade doesn't go up in smoke, I recommend the EVGA 500B1. It's a 500-watt bronze-certified power supply, and that will see us hit the $500 US budget right on the nose. Alright, diving into it, we have Andrew's PC, which is dubbed due retirement. Makes sense. The 11-year-old Q6600 has seen better days. That GeForce GTX 1060 is probably not really pulling its weight either. Anyway, the system in its current form or thereabouts was built 5 years ago from second-hand parts, with the exception of the graphics card. The lovely and very retro Cooler Master Wavemaster has seen 3 builds now. It started life with an Athlon 3500, then an Athlon 64 X2 4200 Plus, then an Athlon 64 X2 5400, before going blue with the Q6600. Andrew now uses the system for image and video editing, but of course enjoys the odd games such as R-Factor 2, Borderlands and Roller Coaster Tycoon. I'm sure he'd also like to enjoy some newer, more demanding games as well. Could he actually play them? The only requirement here being that we do keep the Wavemaster case, and honestly, I wouldn't dare replace such an old beauty. What I will do though is replace that crusty old LGA 775 platform. We have at most £380 to play with, so we will be stretching the budget to the max on this one. The best option right now for Andrew's needs would be the Ryzen 5 1600 on the Asus Prime B350 Plus with 8GB of DDR4. I'd love to upgrade the graphics card as well, but rather than opt for a lower end Ryzen CPU, I feel like going all in on the R5 1600 will pay off for that image and particularly video editing. Should Andrew win, he can always upgrade to something like a GTX 1060 in the future, and that'll set him up nicely for gaming. Now, this PC by Hallam is creative, very creative indeed. He says it started life as his grandmother's computer back in 2010 and with a Core i5 7500 in a huge aero-cool case. Eventually, Grandma didn't need the system anymore, so she handed it off to her grandson Hal in 2015 as a birthday gift. Grandmas are the best, aren't they? Hal's made a number of upgrades over the years, and last year the Aero-Cool Knife Box, as he's nicknamed it, cut him for the last time. Sick of getting cut by the case every time he went in there to do some cleaning or whatever else, he hacked it up and just kept the motherboard tray to create the thing you see before you. What he's basically made here is an open-air test bed out of timber and the leftover motherboard tray, and I have to say I absolutely love it. Hal is a robotic engineer student, and in the future he would like to custom design and fabricate his own small form factor micro ATX case, so that's pretty cool. Speaking of which, he does do a lot of CAD work with the PC, and this really is its primary function, though he does enjoy playing games as well. Right now he says he's playing Overwatch, heavily modified Skyrim SE, and World of Warcraft Legion. His dream PC would be based on a Threadripper CPU, but realistically, he's hoping for a Ryzen 5 or 7 upgrade in the near future. So this is a pretty obvious upgrade, though we will be again using every last dollar we have available. The R5 1600 is the most expensive Ryzen CPU we can afford with our $500 US budget, which converted to Australian dollars gives us $645. In addition to the R5 1600, that's going to get us the Gigabyte AB350MD3H with 16GB of memory. Should Hal win, his CAD life's going to become a heck of a lot more enjoyable. Last but certainly not least, we have Scott's White Knight, which despite the specs was actually built very recently using hand-me-down parts from his friends. Now, this is kind of nice. In Scott's words, he had this to say: "Inspired by the content found on Hardware Unboxed, I thought I would give it a go myself, despite all my friends offering to build it for me. It was probably the single most nerve-wracking experience I've ever gone through. However, I was exhilarated by the prospect that it would be something many people have never done that I constructed all by myself." Overall, he's been quite happy with the system, using it mainly to play CSGO. The only issue being that he would love to play PUBG, and sadly it just doesn't run very well on the current CPU and GPU combo. I know that game in particular hates 1GB graphics cards, even with the low quality settings. The Radeon HD 7790 is probably the biggest issue here. That said, I can't leave a man behind, no less in a slow-moving bulldozer, so the FX CPU has to go as well. Upgrading the CPU and GPU on this budget, our $500 US budget, is going to be very tight, especially once converted into pounds. Still, this does allow us to pick up a Ryzen 5 1400 and MSI B350M Gaming Pro, 8GB of DDR4 memory, and a GeForce GTX 1050 2GB graphics card. That will completely eat up our budget, every last dollar or pound, but it certainly will be enough for Scott to enjoy PUBG at 1080p. Last but not least, we have Joshua's Prowl, a humble old Core 2 quad system that I just had to include because his photos are so nice. There you go, guys. Pro tip for Season 2 of Upgrade My PC, please. It's all about them photos. Anyway, handy camera work aside, Joshua certainly needs a few upgrades. Joshua sounds like a real PC parts scavenger, like he could almost be Brian from Tech Yes City's brother. No offense, mate. He says he's that guy who collects old, used and unwanted parts from his friends and puts them in his own PC. As a result, in 2017, this is what he's dealing with, and things look as though they're probably moving quite slowly. Despite the PC's age, he still enjoys games such as Prey, and he also does a lot of video editing work in Premiere. So while Joshua would like to enjoy the latest and greatest games, his focus really is on video editing work. Given the GeForce GTX 970 is still very capable, especially at 1080p, we don't really need to allocate any of our budget here. Instead, we're going to be focusing entirely on rendering power, and that means securing the mighty AMD Ryzen 7 1700 and 8-core 16-thread CPU, and that will make light work of Joshua's videos. The Ryzen processor will be installed on the impressive-looking Asus ROG Strix B350-F gaming motherboard with 8GB of DDR4 memory. Now we're back over to the US for a little Vegemite. That was unexpected. Didn't expect to see Vegemite next to a computer in one of these. But anyway, Australian spreads aside, we have a rather smart looking PC built by JC here, and it was built back in 2014 for less than $500 US, which happens to be our budget today. JC admits though that his priorities were a little off on this one, as he spent most of the money on the case, but after seeing the Ncase M1 version 4, he just had to have it. So it's fair to say any upgrade plans that we make now will be based around this case. Although the system is pretty basic with an AMD A10 7850K APU and the Radeon HD 6870 graphics card, JC's not really asking that much of it at the moment, as he really only plays Super Smash Bros. Melee on NetPlay via the Dolphin emulator. That said, he is planning on upgrading for next year to play Monster Hunter World, which will no doubt be a bit too much for the APU and 6000 series GPU. So for this upgrade, I'm again going to go with the Ryzen 5 1400 because we also need to replace the graphics card, and that will only fit in our budget. The real tough choice here though for me was what motherboard we go with, because we are limited to an AM4 Mini ITX motherboard, and there really aren't that many of those around, and pretty much all of them are priced over $100 US, which kind of blows out our budget a bit. So yeah, there is a BioStar board for $85 US, which looks to be an exceptionally good value buy, but I've never really recommended a BioStar product before, and I was a bit hesitant to touch this one. After a bit of research, it seems to have received pretty solid reviews from professional reviewers, and the user feedback's also been very positive. Since it will work within our budget, and my hands are pretty much tied anyway because we can't afford anything else, I'm going to bite the bullet and recommend the BioStar X370 GTN. It's pretty much our only choice, so let's go with it. And yeah, I've got no reason to doubt it at this point. The only problem with a Mini ITX board, and we'll face this problem with any Mini ITX board, is that if JC wants to expand the memory down, or in the future, he will have to dump the 8GB kit that we've purchased with this upgrade package and then buy a pair of 8GB sticks for a 16GB capacity. But that is the limitation of the Mini ITX form factor, as I said, and there's no getting around that. Then handling the 3D rendering work, which I suppose that the gaming will be the GeForce GTX 1050 Ti, which should be a nice upgrade from the old Radeon HD 6850. Should JC win, he'll be receiving a huge upgrade from what he currently has, and should be well primed to take on Monster Hunter World next year.